The hate that Sword Art Online has gotten is one of the most mind-boggling things I've seen from the anime community. In my circle specifically, it was so prevalent a consensus that I accepted it as true and never gave it a try. It literally took a global pandemic and it being the only mildly interesting thing on Netflix with French dubbing available for me to practice to finally get me to watch this thing. And when I did, I was like, I actually kinda like this. How much did I enjoy SAO? So much I saw the first progressive film in theaters. Hey, leave me alone! But when I admitted this to a friend of mine, she was like, ew, gross, which was shocking, actually. And since then, I mostly kept my opinion on SAO to myself. But as we live in a time where Lex Friedman goes all, do you believe we're in a simulation? Actually, Lex, your face is a simulation. You're trapped in a reality I control with my cyber jujitsu. Maybe now I can finally find love. This all actually brings some of the themes of SAO to the forefront of very pressing discussions these days. When it comes to metaverses, virtual reality, living in cyberspace, losing touch with the actual physical world, and crafting our own social media identities, etc. It's the largest franchise that specifically talks about these current issues in depth, more than anything else I've seen in the mainstream. The Matrix is actually not about big tech taking over our lives with artificial realities and an existential confusion of living too much in the digital space. It's about Plato's allegory of the cave, or gender dysphoria, one of those two. Books like Snow Crash and Neuromancer are much more profound and sophisticated than SAO, of course, but they're more highbrow books, consumed by a very specific type of audience, whereas SAO brings these important reflections to a wider and younger audience, even if it's full of silly anime shenanigans. And yeah, I'm not saying it's perfect or even in my top 10 anime, but I really couldn't understand the hate. All the hate SAO gets baffles me so much I figure the only way I could understand it is the only way anyone could understand anything these days, through a narrated explanation in a British accent.
Hello?
Hey bro, why does everybody hate Sword Art Online so much?
Well, where do I start? I mean, I personally feel like I could write rings around Reki Kawahara. When Kirito's not being an edgelord, he's being an arsehole. Klein should have got more screen time. After the end of the first season, it descends into harem nonsense and loses its point. And don't even get me started on that jump the shark bollocks they've been doing in Alicization and Underworld.
But it has incest, bro. Doesn't that make it Shakespearean? Hello? Bro? You there? Hello? Hello? This isn't to say that I don't understand the criticisms people have for the show. They're absolutely valid criticisms. I even enlisted them on screen. But what actually confounds me is that aren't these issues common in anime in general? I mean, wasn't all this in the weeb social contract we had to sign before engaging with the medium? I mean, this is why everyone calls weebs degenerates, even if there's all the same BS in widely acclaimed shows like Game of Thrones. But it's, the golden age of television when it happens there. The reason SAO didn't bother me is because I had already seen all of this in other anime, many of which are actually more weird and problematic, but still widely loved, and nobody complains about them. Incest. It's much worse in Chivalry of a Failed Knight, and they're actual siblings on that show, not cousins, and people just praise it. Weird tentacle stuff. This scene didn't go too far. It pretty much stops there, and this scene illustrates an important danger of virtual reality, where the most depraved garbage in the human psyche can be manifested onto people, creating new avenues of abuse. Weird, pervy abuse implications. Again, powerful rich people already get away with a lot, and now they're getting the power to create entire realities that we are going to have to inhabit and play by their rules. To me, SAO was clever to talk about this in a way that played out in the princess in the castle archetype from our fairy tales. It's an interesting way to show virtual reality making human fantasies come to life, even dark ones. Also, the chair food fetish scene in Attack on Titan was way worse, but that was done to an adult man, so I guess it disturbs people less than a pretty typical Rapunzel plot, I guess. Harem BS. Okay, it's not a real harem anime, and Mushoku Tensei is an actual harem anime and everyone really loves that one, so I don't get it. And also Mushoku Tensei is more disturbing than SAO. Borderline illegal, actually. As for complaints number 5 to 7, I say again, do you even anime, bro? This stuff is pretty much ubiquitous in all of them. But I guess the one criticism of the show that I kind of agree with is how ridiculous it was for Kirito to summon some major main character energy and go all, "I'm hacking the mainframe!" to save his digital daughter. Yeah, that scene is a little iffy because that totally wouldn't have happened if Kayaba was using NordVPN, this video's sponsor. Because NordVPN is a virtual private network that has threat protection, which shields your devices from malware and trackers, as well as a dark web monitor that notifies you if someone leaks your credentials. So not even Kirito's anime logic would be able to break through. NordVPN is also privacy oriented, which means your internet traffic is encrypted. That way, no one will know that you're like me and prefer to watch anime dubbed and then judge you. Which will be easy to do with NordVPN, because if your favorite anime on streaming doesn't have the dubbing in your preferred language, just use it to change your location, and voila, magnifique. But my personal favorite is how NordVPN allows me to bypass geoblock censorship and I can access important news articles. Like what happened when I sent a simple news report to a friend of mine, and he was like, "Oh, it's blocked. Hold on, nothing a VPN can't fix." And then I asked him, "Which one do you use?" And he replied, "NordVPN, like a proper gentleman." And I'm like, nice. So use my link in the description, nordvpn.com/pilgrimspass, to get the exclusive deal of 4 months extra on a 2-year plan, or a 30-day money-back guarantee. Now back to the video. When you go deeper into why people hate this show, you realize that the true reason is because every person has a different threshold of suspension of disbelief and what they cannot tolerate. And SAO ends up making too many choices, and I would even say somewhat bold decisions, that end up losing people eventually, by taking things in an unexpected direction a lot of the times. That's why everyone has a different point where they just had too much of the bullcrap and abandoned the show, including me, by the way. I stopped watching at the Alicization arc. That's when I thought it was just too stupid for me. For similar reasons that Mother's Basement critiqued actually. Here's why in a text wall. But to me, the first 3 seasons were still pretty good. Since SAO is a series of isolated narrative arcs from season to season, each one being its own isolated story, so it becomes possible to enjoy each independently. Especially the first season. It reveals a world where a new incredibly immersive multiplayer virtual reality game is launched, a full-on gigantic world of swords and monsters, where one can experience an adventure. But then, right as the game starts, the creator of this virtual reality appears and reveals that he trapped them all in a world of his design, where they must play by his rules or die. And in this scenario, the cast of characters that we got were serviceable. Kirito is accused of being a Mary Sue, and I can see why, but when he's not hacking the mainframe, his overpowered status is believable. I mean, he's a loner Asian kid in a video game. Have you met these little bastards online? They'll destroy you in gameplay. If anything, SAO has the perfect setup to make a lonely nerdy kid an absolute badass in a believable way. You do have amazingly proficient gamers at around that age, while a lot of the adult characters had actual social lives and jobs. So it makes sense that Kirito is of the demographic to stand out in this situation. And him being a beta tester, and knowing where the best locations to farm XP are, and going off alone to grind when everyone else is moping about how they're going to die, was actually interesting. Not to mention his background as a Kendo practitioner. He's perfectly positioned to just dominate in this world. It's a lot less contrived than vague magical destinies that most isekai protagonists have, some of which literally makes them invincible and unable to die. And we don't complain about that. In fact, we love it. Kirito is a bit of a tragic character, where in the real world he's more awkward, weak, and withdrawn, but in the death game he absolutely thrives. And when it's over, he feels this guilty, melancholy feeling because deep down, he loved that horrible situation. At least he felt some purpose there, or he felt more alive, I guess. I do think that there is a underappreciated complexity to Kirito, one common in young men these days, which is why he was so popular a character when the anime first came out. And the harem trope that many complain about is pretty ubiquitous these days, but in SAO, they're not really a harem. I know some people say that that's just a fake out, it's actually a harem anime, but it pretends not to be, but no, that's not a harem. Those girls are just groupies around him, and they're groupies that he doesn't respond to. It's not a harem! Asuna is best girl, and it's his one and only, and it surprised me how they just got married in the first season. I mean, they have a full romance arc, you know? Boy meets girl, boy likes girl, they confess their feelings, then they get married, adopt an AI daughter. I really liked that, and it was really wholesome. The type of wholesome relationship you don't really see in anime. There were no love games, no love triangle, just a boy and a girl finding real love in a dark place and being the strength of one another. I really liked that. People insist that it's still just a harem anime for mere wish fulfillment, so that sweaty, lonely nerds can feel like they too can have a bunch of girls pining over them. And yeah, I guess there's an element of that. But to be honest, the groupies of girls around him made a lot of sense. People act like it's unbelievable nonsense. Because Kirito doesn't have a personality, but do you even the female mind, bro? Aren't famous sports stars and celebrities surrounded by ladies? And when it comes to no personality, what about Timothée Chalamet and his one facial expression? And he still has legions of fangirls? Wouldn't it be even more so for the best player in a death game, who's an essential part of beating all the levels and literally saving everyone's lives? Kirito is a top-notch real warrior in this context. And what, do you think guys like that are incels? And that's the appeal of Kirito. What if you were put in a context where all those hours you pissed away playing video games, instead of being productive, actually ended up turning you into a badass that every girl desired? Kirito was a lonely, insecure guy in the real world, but what made him awkward out there made him awesome in here. And he knows that, which is why I like that Kirito was a bit of a confident douche at times. I assumed he was gonna be one of those anime beta boys. That's why they call him a beta tester, because honestly that's kind of how he looks, fragile and a bit effeminate. But no, which was yet another pleasant surprise. When that Smith girl's being all snarky, he gets snarky back, and then she falls in love. When people try to control him, he doesn't play by their rules, and he does the effort to earn that confidence, even if it happened off screen. And despite many of the complaints, I don't think that he's a Mary Sue exactly. I mean, if you ignore the "I'm hacking the mainframe!" Since he does struggle, he does need help at times, and he doesn't defeat the bad guy by brute force and unlimited power, which is a staple of Mary Sue's. In fact, he wasn't strong enough to beat the game conventionally at all. No one was. Another thing that surprised me, they were halfway up the ginormous castle, only beating half of the levels before they almost all died. And I remember sitting there thinking, how the heck are they gonna get out of this? But then he outsmarts the bad guy. He notices a mistake in the system, and he wins by not playing the game by the bad guy's rules, but on his own terms. And when his wife sacrifices herself and dies, I legit gasped. I was shocked, flabbergasted, stupefied when that happened. But then, it was a fake out death, and she's still alive. Of course she is. But you know what? I like that. Because I like Asuna. I'm glad she was still around. And it kinda makes sense that Kayaba didn't kill her. He's a monster and a terrible piece of trash, but he's still a human being, and he formed a personal connection with her as her mentor. In that last episode, when Kirito wakes up in the real world desperate to meet his wife in person, I felt that, man. I felt that. As for the second season, it wasn't as good, but I liked it. Locking up Asuna as a Rapunzel figure was actually a good choice for the fairy tale vibe they were going for. It's okay if a female character is in distress from time to time. Asuna is still a strong lady, all things considered. And the incest arc, well, Kirito's cousin falls in love with him, and it's awkward. But it's a legitimate literary trope that provides genuine character drama moments. I mean, it's in Shakespeare and Greek tragedies and stuff for a reason. And it helps that it was one-sided, and that Kirito, though kind, didn't seem to be entertaining his cousin's weirdness, which makes it more of a genuine tragedy and not the writer's barely veiled fetish. But maybe it is, I don't know. I'm just saying my impressions of the show. The third season with the Game Gun arc was definitely weaker. Again, each season did keep getting worse. But it had cool moments, and I appreciate that they tried something different. I also appreciate that now with the Alicization arc, they tried reinterpreting classical isekai plot points through an interesting simulation hypothesis lens. Kinda cool. Until Alice became a filthy apostate. Why is the church always corrupt in isekai? If I get isekai, I'm not giving a shit. I'm joining the Pope and burning all the heretics. And it's precisely the nature of SAO as an isekai, where the protagonist is transported into a fantasy world of swords and monsters, that makes it so interesting. Because in the show, the first fully immersive virtual reality game to be made is a medieval-inspired one, complete with Templars and beautiful architecture and agrarian aesthetics, but also ancient mythological monsters and plenty of opportunities for chivalric heroism. SAO, both as an in-universe game and as an anime, does a great job at capturing the appeal of the blade, of facing challenges up close and personal, and the respect humans instinctively have for that. We want the blade to still be a viable weapon. We mourn the fact that technology has made it obsolete, which is why we humans fantasize about technology somehow making it viable in a modern context again. The first thing humanity does with super advanced modern sci-fi tech is use it to go back to an idealized Middle Ages, and I love it. With the recent AI craze, one of the first applications of large language models in virtual reality we saw was this.
I wanted to experiment a bit with how to use ChatGPT-driven NPCs, especially in virtual reality.
I am an artificial intelligence manifesting as an old Christian monk. Remember to trust in the Lord. for he is the rock that we can rely on.
Ironically, the mastery of the material world through technology, it makes us more spiritual, because spirituality is the belief that the abstract is more real than the material. And when we start making virtual worlds through abstract numbers and computational code, we start wondering if our world was made the same way, which is why the simulation hypothesis is so popular now. As the ability to create entire worlds manifests itself, we realize that we may indeed be made in the image of God, but it makes some people driven mad by the need to play God, which is what drove the villain Kayaba. SAO was his game, and he was the only real player, because it was designed for him to play as God. And to do that, he had to turn those who would be playing as swordsmen into real swordsmen fighting for their lives, so that he could watch over them and walk among them like a divine being. Kayaba makes it clear when he talks about his childhood obsessions of a castle in the sky, and how he wanted to make that a reality. That trope is a symbol of divinity, it's the heavenly kingdom. But in the end, he's a sham, and his failure makes everything unravel, and he loses to reality because Kirito, who entered the game to play at being a knight, was put in a circumstance by Kayaba that turned him into a real knight, who saved real damsels in distress from real danger, and who slayed real monstrous threats. And the reality Kirito embodied defeated the false divinity of a little man who just wanted to play at being God. And that's where we stop for today. Thank you, my patrons. You guys are the real heroes of the channel, just as the folks of NordVPN are the real heroes of internet safety. I recommend you guys check them out by clicking the link in the description. You have nothing to lose since they offer a 30-day money-back guarantee. And thank you all for listening to my ramblings. Have a good day, my friends.